Well, g'day, Max here again. Welcome back to the shop. So, welcome to part 4 of our Bridgeport Vari-Speed head rebuild. So, what I need to do now is make some room on my bench, and I'm going to do that by refitting the knuckle to the machine and our newly rebuilt head. We'll get them back on the machine. That'll give me some room. Push the tools over to one side, and then we'll start on the next stage. Where the ball gear sits and all that on top of the head here. So we'll see you over at the machine, and I'll lift these up. Well, I'm not going to lift them. I respect my old back too much. It's alright lifting them down. Even that was a struggle because it was stuck. I wasn't stuck just because it's a really neat fit. As far as this, yeah, this was alright because I gutted most of this while it was on the machine, so I didn't have much to lift off. So anyway, I'll get these slung up and we'll get them back mounted up where they belong. Right, so that's our knuckle fitted back in place. I did install a new gear as a couple of the teeth were quite damaged on the old one. The new gear that came was drilled for quarter UNC mounting screws and a 5/16 dowel, whereas my machine has 5/16 UNF mounting screws and a 3/8 dowel. So I don't know why the difference is there, but I just drilled them out and drilled and reamed for the dowel, so all good. So I'll get the head on next. Right, that's the head on. I didn't film it because it was just a matter of picking it up and plucking it on. I did put some heavy duty grease on that rotational gear, and I have given it a full complete rotation around. Make sure there were no spots where it was jamming or anything like that. And like there's bugger all slop free play in that now compared to what it used to have. Like the free play in it is absolutely minimal, so that's quite good. And I just used the gantry, overhead gantry, and just grabbed it with a lifting tag. Right, let's get our housing assembled up, and I'll be going through this manual step by step as they have until I see fit to change direction. So put that over to one side. If I go through the manual, and you guys got to do one, at least you'll see the procedure that I used, you know, following the manual. So what they say to do, and we'll just do that because it's not going to be difficult. Is we put our T-slot bolts back in our housing. And then lower the housing back on, sort of get 120 degrees-ish apart there. He just bolts on there. I'm just using the old, see down the side there, the paint line. That's all I'm using for alignment. 3 washers, 3 nuts. Going back on, sometimes I get a bit fussy with assembly, which is just the way I am, but one of my pet hates is pulling shit apart that's like nuts like this. They've got grey paint on one side of them from when the machine was painted. So I always put that up. It's just a, yeah, not down. Whoops. throw my tools away. Still, these are the first nuts of the day. Give these a bit of a nip down. Okay. Next stage, I think we're going to be looking at this gear. Yeah. Okay. Let me get all the parts together. Okay, this gear gets pushed onto the shaft. Now, there's no reference to this, but what I'm going to do here is ensure that when I tighten the locking screw down, and get a good angle on this, where the shaft shoulder comes through the gear, I'm probably about 1/10 thou proud. If I do that and lock the gear up then, when we push the bearing on, that will ensure the outer race of the bearing is not going to rub on the gear. So that's how I'm going to do this one. So we'll just do up the locking grub screw. Yeah, we're good. We're probably, 1/10 thou proud. One thing I do quite often, it's a perfectly acceptable practice. If you've got nothing suitable just to push on the inner ring, a lot of times I'll get the old bearing and back it up with the old bearing and just press on like that. You know, it's an alternate method if you don't have a pusher for the ID. Old bearing. Okay, let's head back to the bench. Okay, so we've got two wave washers. Drop them in the bore. Insert our gear. Now this can then be inverted. Slipped into our housing. Like so. Now the wave washers, you have a bit of spring here. It's just the wave washers. And two locking socketed cap screws. double check, make sure we're all still nice and free and the gear is around the right way, which it is. So it has a bit of a lead in on the teeth on these for when the other gear drops down and engages. So you can see the angled lead in on the bull gear tooth, and likewise on here. That's why they say don't change speeds with the thing running, turn it off, and if it doesn't engage, just grab the quill or whatever tool you got and give it a bit of a jiggle, and then it'll slip into gear. Right, next up is this tube. So we have 2 circlips to go in and 2 bearings. So the circlips just limit or how far the bearings can actually go in. So the bearings push down against the circlip. Just ensure that they are in correctly. Oops. Tell you what, I might go over to the press and press these in. I'll do that and then come back. It'll be the same procedure, pressing on the OD of the bearing on this one. And likewise, if I can't find anything the appropriate diameter, I'm going to sit the old one on top and push on that. When you do that though, just bear in mind, if the old or your new bearing goes subsurface, make sure you can still get the old one out. If it's only in a little way, you usually can by coming in with a pin punch and getting in behind it there. Right. Okay, so we've just pushed in our lower bearing over there on the press. Now the upper. Before we put the upper bearing in, we have this spacer sleeve which goes in, and this wave washer, and because it has a wave washer, we should be able to this bearing should be able to go in like that and be free. Without being sloppy. Okay. Next part. Right, so we have to assemble the shaft into the hub. I've cleaned up. There was a little bit of minor damage on my one from the Bengal. And actually, before we install this, let's just test our locking nut. Yeah, because this is the locking nut that came off and caused all of the damage. So we just need to test to make sure the threads weren't damaged, and they're not. So there's no locking feature on this lock nut. So when I do go to install it finally, I'm just going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. So looking at the orientation of our shaft and gear in the book, according to the picture, it looks like the recess side goes that way and our gear goes in this way. Okay, so using a sleeve, so we're only pushing on the inner race. Put a cap on the top. backing the press off and just making sure everything's seated nicely before we give our last push. Sit there. Right, we're ready for our lock nut. Right, we can put our locking nut on now. You know, in hindsight, what I should have done was when I was at the bearing shop with the other, to get the other bearings, see if I could get a locking nut that was slightly thicker. This is a standard locking nut of sorts, and it looks like they just machined back the thickness. I mean, the thing realistically only has two threads in it, 2 full threads anyway, which is bugger all, considering you got at least 3/8 of an inch worth of thread there. So once we get this assembled up when it's in the machine, I mean, surely there's plenty of clearance above it, you know. So I don't want to repeat episode. And I was just going to put a bit of blue Loctite on, but we're going to go a bit more drastic, and I'm putting it on with our 680 bearing mount. Do not want this coming off. If I need to get it off again, I'll machine it off. You know, there's thousands of Bridgeports running around the world with this nut, and someone commented the other day their one came off as well. Same issue. You just about get 2 on. So yeah, you could actually order 2 of these nuts and double nut it. And good nip down. Okay, that is tight. Beautiful. All I did was use the same spanner for the end of the quill. I just had to sand down the outside. These are 1/4-inch slots, and it was lucky I drilled my quill out to the cap to 1/4 inch. So yeah, one spanner fits all. Worked out great. You don't want to be doing this up with a pin punch. You actually need to feel how tight you are doing it up so the darn thing doesn't come off. Right, no butcher marks, all good. And just wiping off any excess 680 bearing mount. 680 is good stuff. It's once you put something together with it, it does not like to come apart. And of course, here in Australia, we have to keep it in the refrigerator during summer. The leading edges of the gear are for engagement. So this big gear is upside down. So let's go to the manual. So this is this manual, and this whole section I've got wrong. So in the disassembly section, you can clearly see the leading edge of the gear teeth facing upwards on the ball gear, facing up towards the worm end of the shaft. Okay, so if we look at our one, there's the worm end of the shaft, and that leading edge is on the wrong end. So let's just turn the manual a couple of pages. Okay, we're in the assembly part. The previous shot, that was in the disassembly. Now we're looking at the opposite side of the same shaft, and I've assembled mine according to this manual. So we have the spline drive there, our leading edge facing up, and our worm underneath. So we look at the manual, spline side up. Clearly that is the radius leading edge of the teeth. And of course, when they go to put it in to check the mesh, the leading radius edge is facing up and it should be facing down. So when this gear moves up and down to engage in that small gear, so they've got this gear arse about. So I have to press this off to turn that gear around. And trust me, it was an oh shit moment because I had to quickly clamp this back to the mill table, get our nut back off before that 680 cured. Hardly a drama. However, there's also another mistake in the same section on this manual where they've got it arse about, and it concerns that wave washer, which is at the top. So if we look at their manual, that's the top, that's the upper bearing, wave washer below. So they have the wave washer in the upper bearing. I've just gone on the H&W website and looked at the parts breakdown and a picture of those guys assembling one, and in fact the wave washer goes on the lower bearing, which would be the one down in there, not up here. So I'll press the bearings out and rectify all that and get it back together as it should. As far as manuals go, yeah, well, I hadn't seen any other faults to date with this one, but that whole section is wrong arse about. The other thing is, if you have to be a bit careful if you're using a parts breakdown as a assembly manual too, because sometimes they'll put things in a slight different sort of orientation, just more so for clarity. And yeah, there are rare occasions where that happens as well. But yeah, I've just, because I've been using this and the H&W info, yeah, well, this is the only time I've come across a major discrepancy. So I'm going with the H&W version, as this is obviously wrong. I saw that straight away as soon as I dropped that in for a test fit. So let me rectify this and we'll come back. Right, so that's how it should look. Let's zoom in. So that's how it should look, with the lead-in on the big ball gear facing down, so that so it can enter in when engaged. I don't have the springs in at the moment, as I don't feel there's any need to have them in to check this alignment. That book has them in, but yeah, why would you? If I can get this back out. I do, however, have the spacer, which goes on top of the springs, and did test a spring in a hole. So when it's fully compressed, it does bottom out, so there's no point dicking around with clamps to hold all that down. Just take the springs out. Okay, now I know all that's good, I can go back and refit our lock nut with the 680 Loctite. Nut will drop into there. Just going to put a fingerful of grease around this bore. Same grease, grade 0. This bore gets lubricated by grade 0 lubriplate grease. Now, let me find the hole. There's a plug in the side of your machine. It's got a letter A. This plug here on the side, you unscrew that, and that's how you get access to put a bit more grease in. And the grease goes through. I should have shown this earlier. There's a grease gallery, and there's 2 grease ports there where the 0 grade grease, which is the lubriplate, comes in to lubricate this sliding assembly and all of this rack, the whole lot. So just lubing it all up with the 0 grade. This washer goes on. Sure got a bit around the bore. And all going well. I'm just going to align the rack with the hole where the high-low rack is, and there's a cutout here and there's a corresponding cutout in the bore, which we'll see when we turn it over. And just should when it's in the right spot, just drop down nicely like that. Okay, oops, the spring's just pushed it back up. Okay. So next I'll just flip her over a bit. Just line up our flats and get our guide tabs in. Okay, so there's a couple of these little brass or bronze tabs, and they hold this section here in alignment, stops it all rotating. They just go in like that. Now I'm not going to tighten them up. I'll just leave them a bit backed off because I want to get the high-low lever in, and then we can pull, that will hold this whole assembly together. Okay, to put our high-low range gear in, I've lubed up the shaft. We really need to get it into low range. I'm just going to engage the gear around here. Something like that. Push her in. We'll get a screw in. Okay, now did we get our lever in the right spot? So we're in high range here, low range, high range. I think we're good. Only way you'll know, put it in low range and then look at your tooth engagement, which we're level, so we're not a tooth out or anything. If we were a tooth out, the gear would be sticking up a bit, so and we'd have to advance our lever around a tooth. So now we can tighten up these brass tabs. This one's going to want to move when you monkey. Okay. Nice and free. Okay. Now the hardest part of the whole thing, and apart from the misinformation in that manual, was getting this lever in and around first time. That actually took me, that was my third go to get that in one hit. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I've just pre-packed a bit of grease up inside that gear housing there while it was easily accessible. So what I'm going to do next is put the belt drive gear on. So it's Woodruff key to go in there. It's a bit slack actually. Key's fine, the key's not worn at all, so a bit of wear in the, put a bit of grease on it just to help hold it. And like you'll get accelerated wear on all your keys and that. If you're in the habit of slamming your machine from forwards to reverse, you know, without letting it wind down a bit, that's what's going to happen, you know. So looking at this, there's a tapered side and a flat side. So the tapered side would have to go down because we have this nut that goes on the top. Has a proper seat there. It's not going to get a proper seat if it's on the tapered side. So tapered side down is the way that it's going to go. Make sure, we can't really see, we're just going to have to feel this. I think our key's still straight. Woodruff keys, they can cock over if you're not careful. We'll just give this a bit of a taparoonie down. Like that. And do up our lock nut. Okay, so we need a method to stop all this from rotating. This is a method I employ a lot when I was in my daytime job with gear, working with gears and boxes and that. It's just to, rather than wrap a strap or something around there, which is a bit flimsy, you want something solid. So I'm just going to put a piece of aluminium and drop it down and wedge the tooth in the ball gear. I'll get it sitting in situ, then I'll show you. Just like that, and that will hold that rock solid while we do up our lock nut. I'm just going to put a bit of welly on this, so I'm just going to rotate our housing over. Holding a bit of tension on that nut so we don't like that. Take our aluminium out. Okay, now we're free to put a lot of grease in here. I think we're going to come up halfway up the level of this gear. Once that's in, we can put our cover on. Okay, so now we can put our grease in. So we're back in high range with our gear all the way at the top. And we just want to put it into where it like bottom of the gear. Put some in the other side. Gotta love the zero grease. Okay, I'll let that settle. Don't really want it up on top here. So the grease, we've just put enough in so the grease is about at the bottom of the gear. It's only really used when the machine's in back gear, you know, and the gear then sits down into the grease, but in high range it's clear of the grease. So, okay, now we can put our cover on. There. So if you're wondering what this oil port on the front of your machine is, goes into a gallery and connects up with that little gallery there in the centre, which in turn dribbles oil then down onto your cradle, your feed cradle, so it lubricates all these 3 points there for the shaft and the gear. So that's all that one does. Okay, so I've just very lightly greased up this just to prevent any nastiness, and we're ready now to slip our housing on. Okay, rebuilding a Bridgeport, one lump at a time. Three nuts and 3 washers. Starting to look like a milling machine again. So I'm just centralising this so it's sort of in the middle, giving our spindle a bit of a rotation, making sure everything's free. and just a gentle nip. Beautiful. And check to make sure everything's still nice and free. So high range, neutral, back gear. Beautiful. So we better get some oil in our oiler. Give it a good head start. So we're oiling up that the cradle, back gear cradle gears. Okay. Well, okay, that's another piece of the puzzle completed. I think we'll pull up early on this one as we've just completed a section. So what I need to do now is work on the variable speed pulleys and get the bushes replaced in them because they're glued in, and the glue needs to really cure overnight. So I'll get them cleaned up and all prepped up for the next video, where we're going to be rebuilding the vari-speed, well, replacing the bushes and the vari-speed gear up the top, and we'll be fitting in our new spray welded shaft as well and new bearings. So anyway, cheers, thanks for watching. And oh yeah, just on a side note, as far as that book that we were using goes, that would have to top things out that I could remember out of my whole working career, and I've literally used thousands of manuals, and that would have to be the biggest cock up that I've come across to date. Mind you, the majority of the manuals that I have used are Caterpillar ones, and they're pretty spot on. So, anyway, cheers, thanks for watching, and yeah, hopefully see you in the next one, where we'll be overhauling our top end.